Well, hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Leaders and Learners, where we know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. And I have with me today for you all a special treat. She's a doctor. That means she's smart. She's an author. That means she took the time to put some thought into what she penned. And she is a forever learner and giver. She gives of her time. She contributes to organizations that mean something to her and actually to me too. This amazing lady, since 2018, has been a part of Everytown and Moms Demand Action. She also spends time with fair sentencing, fair sentencing of youth, and it's a nonprofit that contributes to obviously the fair sentencing of youth. And we want to get into that because it's important. You know, we criminalize so much here in our country, things that need different solutions. Everything is not solved by long sentences, arrest, the criminal justice system, especially when it comes to our young people. So let's go ahead and delve into that with Dr. Regina Griego. Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Hi, it's good to be here. Good to see you, Tanya.
Good to see you too. You know, this is a subject that's close to my heart as a gun violence survivor and someone that gives a lot of time to organizations that mean a lot to me. It is so heartwarming to have someone in my presence that has spent so much time, energy, money, and just given of herself to organizations that really are created to make this world better than we got it, leave this world better than we got it. So, without further ado, I want you to let the people know a little bit about you. And I want to jump into the book first. Like, of all the things that you have going on, what, first of all, how'd you get the time to write a book? And then what gave you, the motivation, the words, the thoughts, the emotions to pour into this book that you wrote?
Well, this was almost in Spanish, they call it a descanso. It was a way to take it out of me and pin it to the page. This is a very traumatic event, but it also was a way to establish a call to action in the things that I care most about, which is gun safety in our world, and also the fair sentencing of youth. The story, is about 7 years of legal drama with my nephew, and just how heartbreaking the system worked. And that's the other aspect of my life and my passion is that, I was an engineer for roughly 35 years, and I did systems engineering on very, very complex systems. And as I was going through this process, one after the other systems that we hit were just so painful. And it doesn't have to be this way. And one of the things I believe very, very strongly is instead of putting your energy to fighting against things you don't want, do what make happen what you want to happen. And I want fair sentencing of youth because I think we're throwing our children away. And I think as adults, we're the ones that are making the mistakes around allowing guns to be out there, for one thing, so where children have them. And then of course, with the fair sentencing of youth, I just don't think you should throw a young person away when there's so much opportunity for change. I mean, their brains don't grow till they're 25. And so to put them in prison is a shame. It's criminal in my mind.
Now, I want you to, if you don't mind, share some of the story that's in the book. I know that it's very close to you, and sometimes it can be draining even to talk about some of this stuff. And then you took the time and the emotion to put it into a book, which takes even more of you. But talk about the story and then some of those systems you were talking about that pretty much failed.
Sure. The book is basically starts right before the event, and where my nephew, age 15, although it was determined later that he had the brain of a 13-year-old, killed his father, who was my brother, his mother, and 3 of his siblings. and it catalogs our own journey in terms of trying to figure out what to do and the healing, and then it goes on to the actual hearings that he went through in the juvenile system and the various. He went to 3 different juvenile incarceration systems, and I actually have the hearing dialogues, and it's nice to hear those other voices, the psychiatrists, the doctors, the various people that were speaking during these hearings. And the systems things that I brought in it was very clear, although I was, not very in my right mind right after it. But after I went back, because I'm a very detailed note taker, and so I used the very first encounter with his defense attorney. The 2 things they said was, they went through the fact that, don't talk to him about the crime. The whole place where he's at, the detention center is mic'd, and they'll use that against you. Don't write him any letters about it. The victim's advocate works for the DA. So right there, they're prosecuting him while they're retaining him, which is, to me, just feels like a conflict of interest. And then he said before he left, or one of the things he said was, well, in order to make a case, we're going to have to go after his father. So right there, the division happened. And so the way that the justice system is set up is to divide families. And ultimately, youths either get free or at 21, a lot of here, at least in New Mexico, or they go to prison for life. And that dichotomy is horrible. So the either or, and I can go through catalog 3 or 4 cases in recent history here in New Mexico where the same thing was happening. It's a broken system. We should have a middle way for these children to be redeemed and put back into society, instead of throwing them away in prison or letting them out when their brain isn't totally developed.
You are so thoughtful and compassionate, even towards someone that took something from you. What was your relationship like with your brother?
My brother, I loved him. And that's the thing about the book. And it was a real hard decision because I had to tell, and of course, I'm a fellow for the INCOSE, the International Council on Systems Engineering, which is the largest professional society for systems engineers. And, I worked at a national laboratory. I was a researcher in systems. And a lot of them didn't even have a clue about this part of me, and certainly not the way I was raised. I was raised in a barrio by a single mother, and I tell about that. And I tell about the hardships, and I tell about my brother's own trauma and how this generated a lot of what he perpetuated in his son. And it's just a story that people, other people, certainly neurologists or neuropsychologists, see over and over again in the justice system. Generational trauma. Basically, trauma is passed on through the generations. And that's the story. Basically, generational trauma in this environment, which is an Hispanic old time. And because we were part of Spain, we were part of Spain longer than we were part of Mexico before we became a territory of the United States.
That seems to be kind of a cliche word these days. So I want you to break it down a little further. What is generational trauma? How is it passed from generation to generation? Because I think it's kind of evasive to folks that maybe think they haven't experienced it, which is funny because once you start digging into it and digging into their life, they realize they probably do have some generational trauma. But for those that seem unfamiliar with generational trauma and how it's passed down from generation to generation, talk to me about that.
Well, I start with my dad and his relationship with his father. His father was his went out to cities to work while his wife stayed with the kids in the middle of nowhere homesteading. So she had like 10 children and there was no father around. So there's an absent father, right? And when he was around, he was usually irritated, and they just tried to steer clear of him. And so my father then married my mother after he broke up with a fiance, and the fiance came back into the picture and he leaves. So we have another absent father. So we have more boys that do not know how to be a men, don't know how, that wasn't modeled to them. We have women that are very hurt, raising more children than they can actually raise, which is difficult in terms of feeding them, giving them proper medical care, having the patience for them. And my mother was rough, you know, so that passed on to my brother. And then my brother goes through series of you know, situations where he's traumatized, including being in the National Guard and being one of the people called into the largest prison riot, or the worst prison riot in US history, and watching men do unspeakable things to each other. And then going into the 82nd Airborne and being put on a mission in Egypt, a peacekeeping mission, further being traumatized, and he never addresses his PTSD. So then he comes and he teaches his son how to be a soldier, and adopts a lot of this really far extreme kind of views about the US government potentially coming into the, you know, and that he's going to have to fight the US government. He acquires 8 guns and teaches his son how to be a soldier. And at the same time, part of that is being tough on his son, which includes beatings that are not normal and other kinds of extreme behavior to try to toughen the son, which is talked about in other books, you know. And eventually, and then he isolates them from any kind of, he's supposed to be homeschooling him. They're supposed to be homeschooling him, but the mother stops homeschooling him at 3rd grade, calling him, you know, willful and stubborn and stupid. And so this kid has very few options, and his brain, basically, it's trauma-induced schizoaffective disorder is what they diagnosed him with. And he suffered a traumatic brain injury from his dad knocking him out. And so it's just that anger in the men and not proper role modeling that happened generation to generation to generation, and resulted in this unimaginable event. And I knew all of that in my heart, and it was impossible to communicate it to people without writing this book.
How much of this affected you? And I want you to speak to secondary trauma, because that too is a thing that people don't acknowledge. Secondary trauma, secondary PTSD. It's a real thing. Talk to me about that.
Well, that's the other big decision I had to make in the book, was to actually be frank about some of the healing I had to do in process. And I wrote a letter to my brother when he went AWOL from the military, and just professing my love for him and my concern for him and all of that. And we found that after the event, close to his personal items. This is a letter from 1983, and this is 2013. He kept that letter close to his personal belongings. And it just made me have a flash of memories, including an event that happened with my sister-in-law, who we lived with, he and I only, my sister-in-law and my brother, for 2 years, almost 2 years. And she was very abusive. And I watched her do the unimaginable to him. And I actually recorded in there, you know, doing a vision quest, and the guide, who is also a psychologist and a therapist, leading me through a vision where I, as an adult, walk into that situation, gather my little self in my arms, and tell her that there's nothing she could have done. There's, you know, it's okay to be mad at this woman doing this terrible thing. and taking her back with me. So reclaiming that little one that saw something so unimaginable that, and so there's a series of things like that that I talk about in the book. And it was a real decision because some of my readers said, oh, you're going to be so vulnerable with this stuff. And they also said things like, well, this might not make you credible as a storyteller because I'm talking about this kind of stuff. But I felt like it was important to model how to heal from trauma.
I talk to people about, not just telling somebody you were scared or telling someone you were sad, but actually walking them through that, how you got from happy to sad, how you got from hurt to healed. I understand how you did that. I understand how you did that. But I also know that during that walk, sometimes you can get stuck. Were there moments where you got stuck? And what does that look like?
Well, I think the hardest part is that, because this was such a dramatic 7 years, because initially he was going to get out at 21, and then the appeal came through and he had to go through more hearings. And then the ultimate is that he ended up in prison. And when they first decided that he was going to get out at 21, there was just an outcry from part of the family. And they did change.org and all that kind of stuff. And that was reeling for me. I mean, it was like, and then right after that, my stepmother, this is a woman who hardly was in our lives, came out and did a little demonstration at the university. I don't even consider her family, but they covered it as if she was family. And I talk in the book about an encounter with my brother who walked this journey with me. He's my younger brother. And he was an advocate for juvenile justice, fair sentencing. And we have an encounter where I'm just losing it. I mean, I lost it. And I do the exchange of emails, and it was just a threshold of just trauma and, the events that, and I talk about those kinds of things where I lost it, but then I talk about regaining my balance through practice, meditation, the things that we do, poetry, writing, those kinds of things, because that's the thing about recovering from trauma, and become practiced at it. You know where to go when you feel yourself out of balance, when you're not centered. And that was the discussion with my brother. I can't hear you all of a sudden.
You have a lot going on. You're highly educated. You're incredibly involved in so many different things. Talk to me about some of those other things that you are involved with, and how do you stay balanced, knowing that truthfully you're always dealing with this. Like this stays with you. It's never really gone. So some of those other things that you're involved in and how you continue to progress in life. It's tough stuff.
Well, I think, and this is modeling from my engineering career, case studies, stories are the most effective way to teach, And so because I'm just a natural teacher, because I was a professor and then I taught systems engineering for a lot of people at my national laboratories, teaching people, basically giving them a model, an example for all the things that went wrong is enormously important, in any discipline. And so just being able to teach how the juvenile justice system is broken, basically model that, show them the story. And so it's a way of educating and it's a way of advocating. And it's a strong way to do both of them, because you can do that and lots of people do it, and it's good. They tell their story, but it gives more traction when you have it in this kind of form. And the way I stay balanced is that I have grandchildren. I swear in my screens that come up, I have these grandchildren coming up, and every time I turn on my computer or get to my computer and I watch them scroll, oh my God, that's just like I can't help but smile and just realize this is why I'm doing this work, is to make the world a better place for our children, because that's where my heart is. It's for our children, for our future generations. In the Native tradition, we say 7 generations. Think about 7 generations from now, what this planet's going to be like,
Mm.
and what our justice system is going to be like, and how safe it's going to be to go to school and be around in communities. That's what we all should be thinking about.
Well, listen, one thing I know for sure is everybody don't think like us. So
Yeah.
let's get into that a little bit. So with every town and mom's demand, the work that we do, it's important. We have campaigns where we are working with legislators to try to get common sense gun laws passed.
Yep.
And I had a guy the other day troll me on Twitter, and he said, he was just like, "Oh, gun sense laws they're just nonsense. They don't fix the problem." My comment to him was, when you have a car accident every day at a particular area in your city, there is no one solution. It's not just fix the roads. It's not just do the handle the lights. It's not just get more patrol. It's multi-pronged, right? There's so many different ways and so many pieces that go into fixing a problem. So with gun violence, what are some of the solutions that you kind of have come up with, or what do you think about how we get to a better place with our epidemic? Because that's kind of what it is.
It is an epidemic. And I must say, you're a systems thinker, Tanya, which is beautiful. You know, anytime something, there's a problem, it's a multifaceted situation. So you have to look at the context and all the systems at play that feed that. So in every town, and part of this last year, we advocated for what we call violence interruption programs. And we have a pretty good violence interruption program started here in Albuquerque around intervening, like if there's a gang hit, going to the one that got hit and trying to address their needs and help them out, and encouraging them not to take, retributive action. So there's poverty. New Mexico has one of the highest, or we're really down on there in terms of where child poverty is. And that's a big deal because desperation creates kids that are hurt. I give a talk through moms that says, if you had your needs met as a child for the most part, and you felt safe most of the time, consider yourself lucky, right? Because those things, when you don't feel that as a child, you grow up angry and desperate in some cases, and you do stupid things, more stupid things than otherwise would happen. Families are complex systems. In complex systems, you don't know exactly the outcome. If I do this, then I'm guaranteed this outcome. That's not the case. You do as many things as you can to kind of lead the kids in the right direction. And getting guns off the streets and out of kids' hands involves, more access to mental health or counselors at schools. It involves, parents advocating for some sort of measure to check for guns. It involves certainly passing laws that make things like ghost guns illegal. We just had an incident here where a 14-year-old killed a 16-year-old with a ghost gun. Of course, mental health, if you have any idea that somebody is, thinking about suicide, which a lot of our children are killed by suicide. They get a gun. They're, impetuous. And if you don't have a gun stored properly, then they get a gun. So there's any time that kind of situation, you want to get guns out of the house. So teaching this Be Smart program on how, educating parents on how to keep guns out of the hands of their children, passing secure storage laws. There's a number of things that we can do, and certainly addressing just our community health is important. How healthy is the community?
Absolutely. I learned that the hard way though. When you said I'm operationally, operations minded. I learned it the hard way because you think you want to convince people of your way of thinking. You want them to believe what you're saying and go along with your plan, but we are also all a culmination of our own experiences, and if you haven't experienced life the way that I experience, no matter how much I share with you, you're not going to see it that way. So
Right.
let's find something that we do have in common, and maybe we can bring out a solution from there. But there are people that really just are totally against it. Let me get back to that guy. So here's the thing. He said something to me like, I said, violence begets violence. And he says, well, it should. If somebody does something to you and you legally have the right to do something back, then you should. And I was like, so, okay, for all the kids that are out there that things have happened to them, should they just grow up just shooting people? Like, is that what we're teaching here? That's what
Yeah.
we're doing now? And I just went back to go read it to you. And apparently he has deleted all his messages to me. So I'm not saying he thinks my way, but I also looked him up, and he is someone that has a business who makes money from gun ownership. It's like,
Absolutely.
so we have to look also at the monetary piece of all this and
Absolutely.
how we get people, even people that financially benefit from guns gone wild, to
Mhm.
see how harmful it is to our society. So I guess that probably is going to be the biggest challenge because, well, money is in our politics, money is in everything. And at the end of the day, how we show common sense to people who think with their pocketbooks is going to be, yeah, that's going to be the job.
Right. Well, I had one detractor, and one I've got over, on the order of 25-star reviews of my book right now. And one guy came out there saying, very well written, but twisted. Basically, I used emotion to blame the family that was murdered for what happened. And I'm like, you entirely missed the point. I didn't say anything to him, and you can't control those kinds of reviews. But it's just somebody and he called me political, which that's fair. That's fair. I'm being political to some degree, you know. So, but it's interesting how, if they are in that league with the guns, especially if they're making money off the guns, and they're in that frame of mind, it doesn't matter, what you say almost. And the only way you can bring them along is by saying something to the effect of, uh, you know, the market requires these young people to help us grow our society, right? We don't want, these young children to disappear. And how can we work on that together? And I'm not anti guns, I'm pro gun safety. I'm not anti guns. People can keep as many guns as they want as long as they lock them up and the children don't have access to them and their ammunition isn't right there with the gun.
Yep,
So,
absolutely. So are you going on tour with your book? Like, how do people get their hands on it? How can they interact with you? Because what I know for sure is that there are folks that probably need what you have to say, need what you have written. They need to know that they're not alone in their trauma and their generational trauma, and someone else understands. So talk to the audience about how they stay connected with you or get involved or get in touch, because I have a feeling that you're going to still be doing some amazing things moving forward.
well, they can go to my website. It's called transcending-futures.com.
And I'll
Or
go
they,
ahead and put that in the captions
yeah,
when we're done
and,
with this.
and it's also Sins of the System, which is the name of the book.com. You can get to the same place. Um, and there's a way to put their contact information into the website. I also have a Twitter page and a Facebook page, Transcending Futures, and I encourage people to write in the comment if they go to my website and tell me what they're interested in, and I sure will follow up with people.
I appreciate that. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to talk to the viewers. And the listeners today, I hope you guys have all learned something, or at least you know if it's something that you're experiencing, you're not alone.
Mhm.
I love my authors. I think it's incredible when someone takes their thoughts, their ideas, their emotions. And yes, you did have some emotions attached to that book, as you should. And that is some of the best reading is when people take you along on the journey with them through their emotional roller coaster, because you get to see, like I say, you can't celebrate the victory until you have really delved into the challenge and the struggle, the drama and the trauma of what you went through. So I appreciate you. I want to thank you for being here. And I hope you stay in touch because I have a feeling you're going to have more to share in the future.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
Great.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for sticking around. Make sure you comment in the section below. All of her information is going to be down in the caption. So get in touch, stay connected, and we will see you on the next ish episode of Leaders and Learners.
Thank you.